Welcome to our CACFP annual training for site coordinators and extended day programs for the 2026-2027 school year. Thank you for taking the time to complete this training. As site coordinators, you play an important role in making sure our after-school meal program operates correctly and that we are following the requirements of the Child and Adult Care Food Program. The goal is to make sure everyone understands their responsibilities and feels confident in following the CACFP requirements throughout the school year. Before we get into the specific procedures, let's start with the basics. What exactly is CACFP? CACFP stands for the Child and Adult Food Program. The purpose of the program is to provide no-cost, nutritious meals to eligible participants in a variety of settings, including childcare centers, Head Start programs, after-school programs, emergency homeless shelters, and adult daycare centers. For our purposes today, we are focusing specifically on the after-school meal program. Because CACFP is a federal USDA program, there are specific guidelines and rules that must be followed. Following those requirements is important because it allows the program to remain in compliance and receive reimbursement for the meals that are served. So, when we talk about the paperwork, meal service, meal pattern, or point-of-sale procedures today, these aren't just extra steps. They are part of what allows us to properly document and claim the meals we serve. Now let's look specifically at the requirements for the after-school meal program. First, meals must be served after the regular school day ends, which means after the final school bell. Students must eat their meals on campus while participating in educational or enrichment activities. This is an important part of the after-school program. Another important requirement is that students may not take home more than one meal component for later consumption. As site coordinators, you can help make sure these expectations are being followed by communicating with your after-school staff and working closely with your cafeteria manager. If there is ever a question about how the program should operate at your campus, make sure you communicate with the appropriate child nutrition staff rather than making assumptions. The contact info is listed below. You may reach out to Heather Kuznier. Before we get into the specific procedures, let's start with the basics. What exactly is CACFP? CACFP stands for the Child and Adult Food Program. The purpose of the program is to provide no-cost, nutritious meals to eligible participants in a variety of settings, including childcare centers, Head Start programs, after-school programs, emergency homeless shelters, and adult daycare centers. For our purposes today, we are focusing specifically on the after-school meal program. Because CACFP is a federal USDA program, there are specific guidelines and rules that must be followed. Following those requirements is important because it allows the program to remain in compliance and receive reimbursement for the meals that are served. So, when we talk about the paperwork, meal service, meal pattern, or point-of-sale procedures today, these aren't just extra steps. They are part of what allows us to properly document and claim the meals we serve. Now let's take a closer look at the 5 meal components. A CACFP meal must consist of all 5 components: meat or meat alternative, grain, vegetable, fruit, and milk. For reimbursement, students must take all 5 meal components. Students cannot simply choose to opt out of a component. If a student does not want an item, they still need to take the component and may discard it afterward. This is an important point for anyone supervising the meal service to understand. For example, if a student says, "I don't want the fruit," the student still needs to receive and take the fruit component. The goal is to make sure the meal being served meets the required CACFP meal pattern and can qualify for reimbursement. So, as you are supervising your after-school program, keep an eye on what students are receiving and make sure the 5 components are being provided as required. Water availability is another important part of meal service. Water must be available to students throughout mealtime. There are different ways water can be provided. Examples include a water fountain in the area of meal service, a pitcher of water with cups, or water bottles in the classroom. The important thing to remember is that students need access to water throughout the meal period. Milk is a required component of the meal and cannot replace the requirement of water availability. As site coordinators, this is something you can easily check before meal service begins. Take a moment to make sure students have access to water and that the appropriate supplies are available. Let's talk about meal accommodations. Child nutrition accommodates for several types of dietary needs, including allergies, intolerances, supplements, and texture modifications. Listed on the slide are some examples of dietary requests that child nutrition does not accommodate, including religion, vegetarian, and personal preferences. If a student needs a dietary accommodation, please do not try to determine or create an accommodation on your own. The process is to let your cafeteria manager know. The cafeteria manager will then inform the dietitian. This communication is extremely important. If a parent, student, teacher, or staff member approaches you with a question about a dietary accommodation, your role is to make sure the request gets to the appropriate child nutrition personnel. When in doubt, communicate with your cafeteria manager so the request can be handled appropriately. Now we're going to talk about the order form. This form is an important part of documenting the supper meal service. First, make sure the campus name and campus number are completed. The supper ordered and supper delivered boxes are completed by the kitchen staff. The manager must initial the order on the form. Let's look at an example. You ordered 10 and served 8 meals. You will document 2 under supper returned and 8 under supper served. The supper returned and supper served sections are completed by the after-school staff. You'll also see a section for after-school staff initials. These initials help document who completed the information. Totals are completed weekly and monthly. On the last serving day of the month, signatures are required from both the site coordinator and the manager. When completing paperwork like this, accuracy is extremely important. Take the time to review the form and make sure the information is complete before it is finalized. This is a shared responsibility between the kitchen staff, after-school staff, the manager, and the site coordinator. Now we're going to move into meal service. This section is especially important because the way meals are distributed and recorded directly affects how the meal is documented. We're going to look at what proper meal distribution should look like and what practices are not allowed. When meals are distributed, meals must be distributed to students one at a time. Students must also be accounted for in the point-of-sale system at the time they receive the meal. The primary way to record the meal would be through using the iPad with Express Point by scanning the student ID barcode or typing in the student number. The backup is to use the mechanical failure backup form and check the student's name off. The timing here is very important. The meal should be recorded when the student receives the meal. Practices that are not allowed: placing meals on students' desks before the students arrive or recording meals after students have already been provided the meal. So, the process should happen together. The student receives the meal, and the student is accounted for at that time. As site coordinators, you should help reinforce this process with the staff who are supervising meal service. Next, we're going to talk about required signage. There are specific signs and information that need to be displayed in the area where the supper meal is being served. Let's take a look at exactly what needs to be available. Required signage must be displayed where the supper meal is being served, and it needs to be accessible to parents. The 3 required items are civil rights information, also known as the Justice for All poster, the menu with dates, and the building for the future poster. The example shown on the slide gives you a visual of what this information can look like when it is displayed together. As site coordinators, one of the easiest things you can do is periodically look at your meal service area and make sure the required information is still posted, visible, and accessible. If something is missing or needs to be replaced, communicate with the cafeteria manager. Now we're going to talk about point of sale. Our primary point of sale is Express Point, as we briefly mentioned earlier. The purpose of this portion of the training is to make sure everyone understands which system is used as the primary point of sale for meal service. When students receive their meals, they need to be accounted for through the appropriate point of sale process. Your role as a site coordinator is to understand the importance of students being properly accounted for at the time they receive their meals. If you have questions about Express Point or need assistance with the system, please communicate with the child nutrition staff supporting your campus. The next slide gives us a visual look at the Express Point environment. You will see, this is the system used for the primary point of sale process. If you are new to the process or have not used the system recently, this is a good opportunity to make sure you know who to contact if you need assistance. You will reach out to Brooke early. Remember, the important part for the site coordinator is making sure the meal service process and the point of sale process work together.
Express Point, you will double-click the Express Point icon. This screen will appear. If it is your first time logging in, you will be asked to enter your school district. Please just enter Fort Bend ISD and click Proceed. From here, you'll type in your username and your password and click Login. This screen will appear. It takes a minute to upload. From here, you will open your service if you are in the correct school. If you are not in the correct school, I'm going to show you in just a second how to switch that. So here I'm going to click Open Service. Let's say I'm not in the correct school. I will come down here and click Switch Sites. And then I will scroll through until I find the site that I want to be in, and I'll click on it and hit Close. Here, we don't put any money in as we don't take any cash. We will just click Open Service. Please make sure that your meal type says CACFP Supper and your menu says CACFP Supper. When you scan in a child's ID, they should pop up on your screen like this. You will click CACFP Supper. It should say CACFP Supper here, $0, and hit Charge. Now, if you don't have a barcode, you can enter them by just putting their number in. Please make sure you're leading with a 0. And hit Enter. And again, you just click CACFP Supper and charge for the meal. You can also look them up by name. You only need the first 2 letters of the first name and the last name to find them. And click Search. This is the student I am looking for. I'm going to charge them for their supper, and I'm going to click Charge. I am done. So now I am going to close my service. Please make sure again that you are putting 0 for you have 0 for your balance. Hit Close Service, and this screen will pop up. Do not close this window until this screen goes all the way through so that everything downloads correctly.
Because technology doesn't always cooperate, we need a backup plan. When there is a mechanical failure with the primary point of sale system, use the mechanical failure backup form. If barriers arise with your primary point of sale system, this will the emergency point of sale process. It's important that staff know where the backup forms are located and understand what to use to document when the primary system cannot be used. The backup form allows us to continue documenting the meals being served when there is a mechanical failure. If you ever need to use the backup process, make sure the form is completed carefully and accurately. The next slide will walk through the information that needs to be completed on that form. Let's take a closer look at completing the mechanical failure backup form. The form must be completed in blue or black ink. If a correction needs to be made, the original information should be marked through with one single line. Then the correct information should be documented with your initials next to it. Please do not erase or completely remove the original information. The trained staff member completing the form must provide their printed name and signature at the bottom. The attendance and receive meal section needs to be completed with the required information. This includes the campus name, program, date, school number, student's first and last name, age, and ID number. The form also includes the complete the total daily count, suppers delivered, and suppers returned columns. Accuracy with this form is extremely important because this documentation is being used to account for the meals served. Take your time, write clearly, and review the form before completing the meal service documentation. Review the example on the slide for a visual reference for how the completed form should look. That brings us to the end of our CACFP annual training. Thank you for taking the time to review these requirements and for the important role you play in supporting our after-school meal program. Your attention to these details helps us maintain compliance and, most importantly, helps us provide nutritious meals to our students. Thank you for your partnership and for everything you do to support our students and our child nutrition program.